What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Common Sense, Logic, and Reason. In my video, Race Hustle Rhetoric, in which I explained what race hustle rhetoric was and how it's used as excuses by race hustlers, I said that I was going to start doing a series of videos in which I would take specific examples and we were going to talk about it and ultimately debunk it so that if you ever ran into that example that you would know the information. Well, today is Race Hustle Rhetoric episode 1, and today I'm going to cover an example of end result thinking. Now if you ever get into discussion on a topic of blacks in economics, and why is it that you often see such a lack thereof amongst blacks when it comes down to economics. One of the common excuses that you will hear is money being locked out of the hands of black people. And there are basically two arguments that you will hear. Now, by the way, there's also in his historical crime element to money being locked out of the hands of black people, but today I'm going to deal specifically with the end result thinking. But there are basically two arguments that you will hear. The first argument is that that there are all these blacks in America, all these business savvy black people, wanting to start all these business in the black communities so that we can get economic activity going on amongst ourselves. And they're all lining up in these banks and these Indian institutions. There's a line out the door wrapped around the blacks of all, wrapped around the block of all these black people trying to get all these loans, to do such, to get the capital to start all these businesses. And the white man who's in charge of the lending process is purposely rejecting black people because they don't want to see black people, starting to practice group economics amongst ourselves. They don't want to see any economic activity amongst black because, well, he's a white supremacy. As a result, blacks end up being rejected for loans at a higher rate in which white people are, and the end result is that blacks, end up having capital locked out of our hands. Well, is this true? Sure. As I said in my race hustle rhetoric video, there is always some truth to the rhetoric. There's always a little kernel or a little grain of truth. Now, it is true that blacks are rejected for loans at a higher rate in which white people are. However, it is also true that blacks on average have worse FICO scores than white people do. And if that's true, then it should be no surprise that we are rejected at a higher rate than which white people are. And by the way, Asian people on average have better credit scores and are approved for loan at a higher rate in which white people are. But does race have anything to do with it? No. Then what determines your credit score? Well, the actual formula that's used is pretty much a guarded secret, an industry secret. But we do know factors that involve, such as your credit history. If you don't have a credit history, then your FICO score is going to be 0. Or the type of credit that you have, how much secured debt that you have versus unsecured. Or, the amount of credit that you have in relation to your income. If you have more credit in relation to your income, where you're going to be a greater credit risk, which is going to affect your score. And also, of course, are you paying your bills? These are all factors that goes into your FICO score, but race has nothing to do with it. Which means that if blacks, if we have some of the worst credit scores, and we are pretty much scraping the bottom of the barrel, I believe only above Native Americans, and they pretty much live on reservations, which is a different dynamic. But that means that our bad credit scores is a result of our behavior. We're doing or partaking in the behavior that's causing us to have bad credit. Nobody puts a gun to anyone's head, forcing them to go out there and do the things that cause themselves to have bad credit. We're doing it to ourselves. So the problem isn't systematic white supremacy. The problem is systematic jacked up credit. And we all know that black people are notorious for having bad credit. But if there's all these blacks trying to get all these loans and start all these businesses, you would think that as black people, we will be leading the way and seeking information on credit repair or going to seminars in credit repair. Well, is that the case? I don't know, but I seriously doubt it. Now, the second argument that you're going to get when it comes down to money being locked out of the hands of black people is the notion that all these minority programs and that 80% of them go to Asian people. Well, is that true? Yes, it is true. During the civil rights era, as part of the civil rights legislation, there were several programs that were put in as compensation for black people, and they were created specifically for black people. However, all minorities were able to receive them. Well, because of that, Asian people have been getting access to 80% of these programs. Now, is there any rules or any laws that specifically set aside 80% of these programs to Asian people? No. So then why is it that Asian people gain access to 80% of these loans, or these programs? Well, could it be that they are doing what it takes to gain access to 80% of them? Could it be that they are going through the proper channels, filling out the proper paperwork, and submitting the proper applications to gain access to such a high percentage? Could it be that while we as black people are out here race hustling, that they're economic hustling? Boy, I mean, again, it ain't because of systematic white supremacy. And I mean, I don't see how we as black people can hate on the Asian people because they're out here hustling and doing what it takes to gain access to such a high percentage of these programs. I mean, what's stopping a black person or any black people from going out and doing what it takes to gain access to a greater percentage of these programs? And if we stop worrying about white people all the time and worry about ourselves, we'd probably gain access to a greater percentage. But again, if you ever hear any cries of money being locked out of the hands of black people, well, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. On a side note, though, this is why it's so important for people to be informed with the information, to be informed with the facts. Because the more informed you are, the less susceptible you will be to the nonsense. I mean, could you imagine some race hustler somewhere crying, money being locked out of the hands of black people, and the difference in response to those who are informed with the information and between those who aren't? Well, it's going to be drastic. Also, in the video earlier, I said that Asian privilege is more pronounced in this country than white privilege. Well, knowing the race hustlers and being exposed to the race hustlers and knowing what they're going to say before they say it, I already know the response that's going to come out of their mouths, that being Asian reparations. So my next video is going to be Race Hustle Rhetoric, Episode 2, Asian Reparations. And as always, y'all, until next time.